Okay, good morning everyone. Peter Newman here from ARI. We're just getting a bit organised for this morning's webinar. Yeah, we've got a few people logged on and more to come, so we'll just do a couple of minutes of housekeeping, and then I've got Rod Messina here with me, and Rod will fire up in a couple of minutes. So yeah, just a couple of things about WeedSmart. Most of you probably know about WeedSmart, but it's an industry initiative where a lot of the chemical and seed companies have pulled funds, as well as GRDC, and the idea is to put out a consistent message about managing herbicide-resistant weeds. It's being run by ARI at the moment, led by Lisa Mayer, and we are continuing to do so. We've had the annual general meeting, and WeedSmart should continue for at least another 2 years, and then beyond that, hopefully, we'll continue to get support. So, yeah, it's going well, and hopefully you've seen plenty of it in the media and so on. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. You'll see that you've got the menu box on the right-hand side of the screen there. You can minimise that clicking on the orange arrow so that it gets out of your way. And then if you need to put a question or something in, you can maximise it by clicking on the arrow and type a question into the questions box. We encourage a lot of questions. It makes it very interactive. So please make sure you put a question in as it springs to mind. We'll stop periodically through the webinar, and we'll answer some questions as we go. If things go pear-shaped for you, probably the best thing you can do is write down that mobile number there and call Ellen. Ellen from Coccinall is in the co-pilot seat this morning. Ellen will fix your problems if the webinar goes bung. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but yeah, might pay to scribble down that mobile phone number, and Ellen can help you out if you have problems. We've got about 20 people on now. We'll wait for just another minute or two before we start off, just to give people another minute or two to log on, and then we'll get into it. Been a good bit of the season over here. We had a dry spell for June and July. Things are looking a bit dodgy this part of the world. We just got about 80 mils of rain in some places. So, good morning to Rod Messina.
Morning Pete. Morning guys out there.
Pretty handy bit of rain, mate. You must have been pretty happy with that.
Yeah. So we sort of missed out this last week. We had a central wheat belt. Got that sort of 50 to 100 mil, but we got ours the week earlier. We sort of got 40 to 92 the week earlier, and yeah, this last week sort of 26 over the whole lot. So yeah, we've had sort of our average July, which yeah, we haven't had an average May or June. So hopefully we're going to be a little bit back on track.
So the story for this part of the world was a big summer rain, enough rain to get a crop out of the ground in May, and then not much for couple of months, and then we've just had some good rain to get it all going again. So things are looking pretty good. Could always be better, I suppose, but no, it's pretty good. We might get started with a webinar this morning. Rod, I mean, you're possibly, I put on Twitter yesterday actually, which you wouldn't know because you're not on Twitter, but possibly the world champion of the world record holder of of hectares of Windrowed bird. I reckon you might have set fire to about 200,000 hectares personally, something in that order. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I haven't worked it out, Pete. I think we lit the first Windrow in 97 and did 2 paddocks. And yeah, I think the following year we did all our canola, and then the following year was all our wheat. All our lupins, all our broadleafs. So yeah, geez, mate, it'd be interesting to work out because I'm still obviously burning everything, these days as well. So obviously not in windrows, in chaff dumps, but we'll talk about that a bit later. But yeah, I'm not sure. I suppose 97 if you work that out, that's what we're talking about. 2007 to nearly not 18 years, I guess. And yeah, sort of would average over 10,000 hectares every year.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of area. So tell us about what happened in 97. Back then, what was it that started it all off? What were you seeing in your crops that made you think you had to do something else?
Yeah, so I was back then I used to be able to be allowed on the header to drive it, and yeah, so I just noticed the odd radish actually in canola out on our Eridu sand plain. So and like I'm talking maybe you know, less than one plant a square a hectare, a lot less than that. I just noticed the the flowers in there, and I thought, well,
Lupins or canola?
no, it was canola.
Canola.
Yeah, it was in canola in '97,
Yeah.
and thought, oh well, so we just dropped the spinners off the back of the header and just did these 2 paddocks, which had some radish in, and yeah, I guess it started from there. So it wasn't a big number thing; it was more just an idea. Yeah, back then, Ant, my brother, and I used to drive both the headers. So yeah, we're just sitting there talking on the two-way. I thought we'd give it a crack and try it. So yeah, it started from there, mate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to get out of the way for a few minutes. I'll let you launch into telling us a bit about it. I guess the idea of this morning is to record, is to show people what you've done and how you've done it for narrow windrow burning. It's taken off on the east coast a lot and in South Australia, and so we can share some experience with people in that part of the world. And I'll hand over to Rod for a while, but as you have a question, type it in and we'll pause once in a while. So yeah, we go for it, mate.
So yeah, obviously we can sort of try and grow reasonable crops up here. We're go to the next one, please. Sorry, right up with this technology. So I guess talking from guys all around Australia that are on this, we're in the northern part of the Southwest Land Division, and certainly the northern part of farming. So yeah, it's pretty dry, and we don't have massive years. Average rainfall here is just over 300 mil, and growing season rainfall of 270. So we're full continuous croppers across all our farm, and yeah, at the moment, yeah, cropping anywhere from 10 to 12,500 hectares, and predominantly wheat, lupins and canola, and depending upon the year, how much fallow we have. So this last year, obviously, we had a good opening rain, good summer, so we virtually cropped the whole farm, fully matched controlled traffic. We're quite fortunate that we've got big open paddocks, so it works well for our tram lining and our efficiencies. So yeah, we can sort of put our 12,000 hectares of crop in just over 20 days. So yeah, as I talked about earlier, we realised a long time ago that we needed to do something, to keep these weeds at bay, and for us it was actually all about the radish. I know the Central Wheatbelt guys were going at things a lot earlier than us and trying to combat ryegrass, but radish is a pretty dominant weed in the northern wheatbelt, and obviously now across probably most of Western Australia, but that was what scared me the most, and that's when we thought we needed to do something about it. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we dropped the spinners off the back of the header and just burnt those rows, and it didn't really work. It did work, but again, back then it was just, yeah, we didn't have the technology where we could measure temperature and all those sort of things, so we sort of thought we needed to make something a little bit better. So that's where we designed this very simplistic chute, which just bolts onto the back of the header, and the whole point of it for us was it's got to be easy to put on and off, otherwise you won't put it on. What in actual fact, years down the track, it ended up being that we actually never took it off. So that's the first one we built for a 2388 in '97, and yeah, that's the same thing fitted on a 8230 now. So there's virtually no change at all. There's a lot of different modifications to that over the years by other people, having them fully enclosed and yeah, all sorts of different things. But we've kept it simple, and yeah, like I say, we still have them now.
I'll just interject and point out that there's actually CAD drawings of that on the WeedSmart website. So Rod and Andrew shared their design, and the guys at Uni of South Australia knocked up the drawings for us. So that people who want to copy it, there's actually there's working drawings on the WeedSmart website.
Yeah, so it's very simple, you know, and the whole point about this is not to make something super expensive or it's going to stop people going into it. You know, a couple $100, you can whip that up. And I guess our whole point, and to try and get the message across there, is even if you don't think you have weeds, every weed you can see, you know, at harvest time is basically either got through or it's germinated late, and normally you do nothing to that but put it through your machine and spread it out the back again. So even if, you know, we always sort of promoted start in the broadleaf crops because they're the easiest to burn. It is a little bit tricky harvesting big canola crops, we admit that, especially if they're swathed and you pull back on the hydrostat pretty quick. It's going to, it could choke your header. You get pretty good at learning how to not do that, and it's probably not as bad now as it used to be that we can, you know, reverse rotors with some of these newer headers. So that's just a side view, but yeah, the sides are open. We have tried another one where we plated the sides to keep it all enclosed, and we've actually measured, you know, because if you drive along the side, it looks like ryegrass or lighter seeds are coming out the side. But with the help of Ari, we've caught all that, and yeah, it's amazing that, you know, pretty well all the weeds go off your sieves and down into that chute. So there's not really much, even though it looks like it, coming out the sides. We hear this a lot, you know, obviously we don't grow massive crops up here as much as we would like, but when it does rain, obviously we can grow them. And back in 2011, we were windrowing our whole farm, and so it didn't matter what the program was or what the yields were. Yeah, we just cut it short as you can, and you just got to be a little bit careful and a bit smarter when you burn, really, which we can talk about that a bit later.
So everyone, if you get a question in your mind, put it up there and we'll pause and we'll do a couple of questions. So keep any questions coming in. I've got one, Rod. When you put the chute on the back, do you have to do much with the wind in the header? Does it affect the wind coming out the back, or do you just leave it as you would normally set the header?
For us, because it's actually an open system, we don't change the header at all. I have seen some that go on to John Deere's and they are fully enclosed, but for us, we don't change anything. It's just a matter of swinging the drawbar out of the way and basically dropping the pin in, and you know, you can put it on and off in virtually 2 minutes at the most. So it's got to be simple to put on and off, and yeah, I think you've got to start somewhere, really.
And your chopper's out of the way, isn't it? It's not chopping the straw first. Some of them chop the straw into the windrow. Yours is not chopped.
That's right. So we've got our chopper. Well, it's more of a spreader, lifted up completely out of the way. Every header's different. Inside the cases now, we've actually ordered them with the straw choppers inside where your beater is. Most of the ones coming into Western Australia in the past haven't had that. But there's a reason for that, and we can talk about that a bit later. But for windrowing, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter if the straw's short or long. So the spinners are basically up out of the road, and everything off your sieves, off your beater, out of your rotor is going into that windrow. So the whole trick is to cut it as short as you can, and we've done so many hours of comparing cutting stubble short and lifting up and trying to nip heads and see how many more hectares we can get done a day. And we've just found that overall, you know, you're not talking a lot of different hectares at the end of the day. Obviously, it's a bit easier now with bigger headers, but yeah, you know, when we used to do it with 2388s and 2366s and stuff like that, you needed every bit of horsepower. But yeah, one of the guys speaking next week, Lance Turner, talks about beer can height. So that's the new benchmark now, is cut everything at beer can height. So yeah, we're virtually on the deck, and obviously the lower you can go, the more weeds you get in the front, and then obviously the more you get in the windrow, the more you can control without spreading them around or leaving them down low. Obviously everyone's keen to get harvesting in the morning and get as many hectares done as they can. Yeah, sometimes that's not a good idea, and obviously, you know, we could sort of thrash it, but and it's the same at night. You try and go for that extra run at night, and yeah, it really isn't worth it because it just creates an absolute nightmare trying to burn that windrow, you know, in the autumn. So, yeah, try and avoid it, and you'll know when you do it. And also, it's pretty easy to block it up when the straw's that tough. And we, yeah, even though we're a long way north, our closest property is 40 k's off the coast. So, moisture is a big issue for us during harvest. Most people think because we're so far from Perth, you know, we don't have moisture issues. Well, moisture is our biggest issue at harvest. So I guess that's just an aerial shot of, they look like wheel tracks, but they're actually the windrows out of the back of the header. And obviously if you've got sheep, that creates a bit more of an issue, but we used to run a lot of sheep and we used to go round and round, and yeah, windrow burning used to take us a long time.
That photo just reminds me, we got pretty excited a couple of years ago when we made the Qantas in-flight magazine for looking for the tattooed paddocks by the farmers burning their crop stubble. So that's been the highlight of windrow burning so far. Keep your questions coming in. We haven't had a question yet. There must be one out there.
So yeah, look, it's and that's obviously a wheat one, but it's not easy. If it was easy, we would have all been doing it a long time ago, but like Pete said, we've sort of been trying to tell this story now for 5 years across Australia and America now. And yeah, I drove over the Mullewa and through South Australia last year, and I was really amazed at how many windrows I saw. So yeah, if you just try one paddock and see how you go with it, and like I say, always try and do your broadleafs because it's a lot easier to burn. This is a little invention that another farmer down at Wongan Hills made, and I wish it was around 20 years ago because it would have saved me a lot of pain, but it's basically you just a fuel mix, and then it's got your gas to ignite the fuel stream, and you've just got electric solenoid, and you press a button as you drive across your windrows, and it shoots out a little, obviously a little mix. And it's certainly, you know, I used to have the hand out the window, windows down, and you'd find under your armpit, and it's no good if you're in a cruiser because it's too high. You'd end up with massive bruises under your armpits. So yeah, this little invention is called the Accufire. It's pretty expensive, but I tell you what, it's made our life and yeah, everyone's life and burning very easy. You can sit there and listen to the country hour and tweet or whatever you want to do, and windows up and air conditioner on to go burning.
You don't mind spending money when it takes away pain.
Yeah, that's right. And I wish years ago I took photos of these bruises because there used to be 3 of us burning. You know, back when we sort of farmed with our cousins and we were cropping up to that 20,000 hectares, and 3 of us a month to go burning, and we'd compare who had the biggest bruises on their under their arms.
Yeah.
So anyway, we don't have to do that anymore. So I guess either you're all converts or you all know what's going on because we haven't had any questions yet. But so this is just burning a canola stubble, and or canola windrow, and you can see that the chance of that fire getting away is very slim. So this is one of the main reasons why you start with your broadleaf, because you certainly don't really need to worry about you know, controlling your fire. So in an ideal world, you want a slight crosswind, and this just sort of obviously puts oxygen into the row. And you find if you burn with the wind, sometimes a fire, especially in a cereal, will run across the top and won't get to the bottom of the weeds. And you know, Ari and those guys, Pete and Dr. Michael Walsh, have done so much research in how long it takes a weed seed to get from the top of the windrow to the bottom.
Yeah, well, I'll chip in there. I mean, these guys were burning windrows in '97. Mike and I started adding a bit of science to it in about the year 2000. We never would have dreamed that, that there was so much to it. We thought it was simple, but what we found was that seeds settled to the surface of the soil very quickly. Mike did some studies to work out the temperature required, and we often quote the 400 degrees Celsius required for 10 seconds for ryegrass or 30 seconds for wild radish to destroy the seed. So not much time, but we had no idea how hot these things were at the soil surface, so we bought a bit of gear, went out and started measuring it. And for a canola windrow like that, we would often find it would get to 600 or 700 degrees, and in some cases it would stay up at that temperature for 10 minutes and even longer. And so, you know, if we had to get it to the temperature for 10 seconds, we were blowing that out of the water. And we see that it's particularly in something like a canola windrow that we really do destroy every seed in there.
So lupins are a little bit trickier, especially lupins in the northern wheat belt where we don't have massive stubble residue. So there were times through the early 2000s and through the drought years we'd still stick with it, and obviously we had sheep back then as well, and so the windrows would be cut. So we virtually used to drive every windrow up and down. So basically as if you were harvesting the paddock in your ute with the burner going, and just to make sure the whole thing, you know, burnt hot enough and got enough into it, which, yeah, obviously is not ideal, but yeah, I guess that was just, we were converted, so it was no matter what, every paddock, every crop, every year.
So Rod, another thing about the crosswind is, I think you often mention, you often light up every 300 or 400 metres. Having the crosswind means that it just creeps slowly in each direction, doesn't it, rather than racing off in one direction.
Yeah, that's a good point, Pete. So when we first started, obviously we were going round and round, so we had to we could only light up one side of the paddock at a time, or one end but now, yeah, what we found is, especially with bigger stubbles, or bigger windrows, we light it, and also we used to light up one end of the paddock and let it creep through for 2 or 3 days, and we just sort of started seeing where, you know, during the night, if you got dew and things like that, that the temperature in the windrow obviously must have dropped so much. And Mike and Pete didn't want to come out in the middle of the night and measure these temperature drops, but we just sort of started seeing survivors in the windrow the following year. So, and there was obviously more chance of the fire escaping, especially in cereals. So we started, I'm just looking, so that the next photo there is basically, we'll drive across a paddock and light the windrow, and it'll burn both ways, and then we'll come down 200, 300 metres, 400 metres and cut the paddock again. And what we found is usually by the time a 250 hectare paddock takes about 40 minutes to light up, once you got to the end of lighting that paddock up, usually the first couple of runs that you'd lit had already joined up, and as soon as you get the front of the windrow, you know, I suppose extinguished or it burning out, then what you find is the heat, is it just basically self-combusts on itself, and it's so much safer. So yeah, like so this is basically one of the 3.2 tonne wheat stubble paddocks that we did, and you know, we were pretty worried, but it's amazing at night, especially with the stubble short. You find if you cut it low enough so that the stubble height is less than your row spacing, it's actually very hard for a fire to run outside of the windrow. And it's just, yeah, and the real trick is, obviously you guys all know your own weather conditions, so you get pretty good at picking when to do it and when not to do it. So yeah, and it is amazing how hot that gets, and particularly canola and lupins or broad veins in very short amount of time. And obviously the true telltale of a good burn is obviously the hot white ash, which yeah, we all know that, as everyone's got a bit of pyro in them. So yeah, and it's just, yeah, it's amazing, you know, when you're summer spraying or even knocking down the following year, you can really tell if you got that temperature right or not, whether things have survived or you know, they haven't, or they've regerminated. Anyone got any questions out there?
Yeah, on, mate. It's all good.
So yeah, that's just the aerial shot, obviously. So like I say, once you get started, it is amazing, even with a big wheat stubble, how you can do it. And what we try and do, if we know we've got a big paddock, you know, and I'm talking 2.8 tonne and over, we'll actually let it get a rain on it, try and get rain on it before we burn it, because I don't know the chemistry of it, but it seems to make it less flammable. And as soon as you've had 25 mil of rain on it and it dries out again, for some reason the rest of the standing stubble seems less flammable. So it's a bit daunting to let it get rained on, but at the same time, especially for us, with a massive program to burn, sometimes we don't start burning till May, just purely because we haven't had a rain on some of the paddocks that are big. So again, by doing lupins and canola or broadleafs, you usually don't have to worry about that. To be honest, the paddocks I've lost burning are actually the lupins and canola ones, because I'm a bit blasé and think I can light them up in not real perfect conditions, or the sea breeze comes in or something like that, and they end up running across like the previous year's wheat stubble and then into the tree lines and stuff. But yeah, for wheat, obviously we're a lot more conscientious. Barley, I wouldn't really recommend. We don't grow barley here, but from word on the wire, it's pretty flammable anyway.
Very leafy. I remember you talking about delaying your burning after your big year in 2011. Seeding 2012, you were hanging out to get that drop of rain on them. And I remember talking to Andrew, and you'd had the drop of rain and you'd burnt some windrows just a couple of days before seeding lupins into that paddock. And Andrew said he actually sprayed some flames at one point. He'd waited that long. The windrows were barely out, and you were spraying and seeding.
Yeah, so like I say, everyone knows their own conditions. So you start off small and you get pretty confident pretty quick, but we've really found do 2 boundary laps. So basically drive with your fire going all the time, have one person coming behind in a water ute, and then start cutting that paddock every 300 metres across your windrows. It knocks the shit out of your springs and your back, but it's such a safer way, because that fire burns out, in a couple of hours. It's all joined up and it's just smouldering, so the risk of escape or turning into full-blown fire across your paddock and burning your paddock out is, and I mean, you're always going to get a little bit of a run, as you can sort of see in the top left corner of the screen there. But you'll find that too, that most of the time it does that, it's probably a bit of ryegrass or broken grass or wild oats or something. So, yeah. Just remember, with farmers, there's no perfect system out there, and there's no perfect job. You've just got to be happy with, trying to do the best you can at the time. So this is a few years ago, these paddocks, and one of the characteristics of our soil is we have beautiful red loam at the base of the hill, and as we go up the hill, the soil just gets lighter and lighter, and then just turns to beach sand. So this is a little paddock right on top of a hill that we never windrowed, because we never really had enough stubble matter to do it. And obviously then also years ago we didn't used to seed our tram lines. So yeah, with the late rain and things like that, you can see the radish in the lines there, and if you look over to the right, you can see all the radish, basically what's under all of that crop. So yeah, that was pretty important again for us to say, look, we haven't been doing this paddock, and it just, the numbers just slowly build up and up. And you sort of compare that, with the paddock that you've done, and everyone goes, when your neighbour comes up for sale and you go, oh, geez, he wasn't a very good farmer, I don't really want to buy that farm because it's full of weeds and chemicals don't work. Well, we bought 14,000 acres like that, and I tell you, within 2 years, we'd knocked those radish numbers down, and then the following few years with moldboarding and stuff, we don't even spray that lupins now for radish, and our backpackers this year have been hand picking them. So we're not the most popular bosses, but it's amazing how quick you can get on top of weeds once you start, controlling seed set.
I'll just add a comment there. I've got a small project this year looking at hand weeding of radish, because some of these growers that have been, particularly these guys, but other farmers around here that have been doing these things for so long, the radish numbers are so low that there's none in crop. And I went to that block that Rod just referred to and drove 1.8 kilometres through it, and I saw one radish. And so, there might be 2 or 3 radish per hectare or something in there, and hasn't even been sprayed, and it's in wheat. So the seed bank has been smashed over a period of, I don't know how long you had the vest with you.
7 years.
7 years. So in 7 years, it took it from just a moderate to big sort of reddish seed bank to just about zero. and not just windrow burning, but it just does show that you can beat the seed bank.
So for us, I suppose we've evolved, I guess, if you want to call it that, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we spent a lot of time on the road with Ari and Mike Walsh and Pete, and also Lance Turner, who's talking next week, and Ray Harrington. So yeah, I guess we've sort of learned all about the perfect systems, and in that time we also started moldboard ploughing our country. So for us, I guess it came down to obviously burning windrows. You're confining all those nutrients to one row. The very second year we did it was basically where we started putting potash or more potash back onto our paddocks, because obviously we were combining all that stubble residue to a narrow windrow and obviously lighting the nutrients up in smoke. So also another one of the reasons really is I would spend a lot of my time burning windrows, and you can never ever get the temperature right all the time. So, and radish, like Pete says, needs a lot higher fire temperature than ryegrass. So for us to burn 10 to 15,000 hectares of windrows every year and to get that temperature right all the time, yeah, I just was wanting to make sure we got the temperature right. So yeah, we ended up building our own chaff carts, and we sort of copied the design of the Tech Farm one, which is what we sort of see as a pretty nice sort of machine, and a nice big machine. So we wanted to challenge ourselves. So there's a question there, what next after chaff carts? Well, there's a couple of answers to that. We know where we're going, but I guess the perfect evolution would be the seed destructor, and I'm sure you've all heard about that. That's obviously can be bought now from the Bruins in South Australia, or there is the prototype that is being put in the header. There was 4, or certainly 2 in WA last year in Ray Harrington's 9230s, and they seem to be working well. They've just got to sort of try and work out the mill. But yeah, I guess another one of the reasons why we went to chaff carts is we've got a problem with our non-wetting sands, and we needed to, you know, I guess if we go back to a purely agronomic soil science quick lesson, soil non-wetting sands is the top doesn't wet up. There's actually a lupin seed. If you look at the bottom of the furrow to the left of the pen, there's a lupin seed there in the dry. Now that paddock there would have had in excess of 50 millimetres of rain on it. So yeah, and it's still not wetting up. So what we ended up doing was actually taking the European technology and moldboarding those paddocks. Now this is like moldboarding beach sand. But what it's done is it's actually brought more clay to the surface, but we've buried all our topsoil and all our stubble residue. So one of the reasons to get into chaff carts was to try and spread stubble residue back on the paddocks. In a perfect world, we would like to go to the seed destructor, so all stubble residue gets back on and we can start trying to build up a little bit of organic matter again. But what this has allowed us to do is, obviously there's spading out there and there's things like that, but with moldboarding, we've virtually managed to get a really good weed control, and we put lime pre and post. So we've actually managed to get lime into the subsoil, get rid of our non-wetting sands, and bury all our weeds all at the same time. So as of this year, just finished, we've pretty well done 9,000 hectares of our own farm with moldboarding in 4 years, and we've contracted probably another 4,000 hectares, and 2 out of 3 neighbours have got moldboard, so obviously it's working. So here's just a photo to, I guess, show you some of the numbers. This is the farm that we bought 7 years ago. Right in the middle of the screen there's actually, we've got a moisture probe. So we told the guys to make sure you don't plough through that moisture probe. And so you can see the ryegrass numbers there. So, you know, we've virtually taken all that seed bank, buried it down 300 mil, and but obviously come up with in a perfect world, a purely clean paddock. So this is sort of where now, because we've got such low weed numbers and we're really holding back sometimes on broadleaf sprays, is we wanted to make sure whatever weed got through to harvest, we captured and we made sure we burnt it at the right temperature. So that was one of the reasons why we went into chaff carts, because we don't mind the odd escape, because it's, as Pete said, it's not worth spraying a paddock that's got one radish or a little bit of ryegrass in it instead of the whole paddock. So by looking at that and seeing anything germinate late, we go, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to get that in the header. We're going to get that in the chaff cart, and when we burn that chaff dump, we know we're going to get the temperature right.
So Rod, back in the day when you're burning lots of windrows, it was a 3 or 4 week job, is that right?
Yeah, look, when it was, it used to take at least, when we used to do it round and round, which was in the late 90s, it would take 3 blokes a month.
Yeah, and what about now with the chaff carts?
Oh, so now with the chaff carts, so I do it all virtually myself, and I can burn 2,000 or 3,000 hectares in 2 hours virtually.
Yeah, so you can knock most of it off in a good week?
Yeah, easy. Yep.
Really?
Yep. So we're a little bit slacker up here. We seem to run into time constraints, so we don't put fire breaks too much around the chaff carts or anything like that. We'll again wait to hopefully get a rain on them, and that'll stop the stubble around them being as flammable. But yeah, look, you can burn, especially canola and lupins where there's not as many dumps. I think I worked out, I used to be able to burn 250 hectares paddock of windrows in 45 minutes. This year I burnt 2,000 hectares of chaff dumps in 45 minutes.
Right. Okay.
So, and that was just all by myself.
So it is a lot more time efficient having the chaff cart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not only that, it just gives you peace of mind, when you're harvesting and knowing that you're going to get those late germinating radish, and you're going to get the temperature right that's going to kill the seed back. So
there is a bit of a mindset there with you guys as well, isn't there? Like when we see a few late radish in crop, a lot of growers are out trying to give them another spray. Whereas often you guys go, well, that's going in the chaff cart. We're not bothering about that last spray. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, no question at all. Yeah, we're sort of not worried about that anymore. We know we're going to get it, and the seed destructor would give you the same. And look, to a certain extent, the windrow burning is exactly the same as well. But if you went through a big heap of radish, you just don't know when you actually get to burn that particular point of the paddock that you're going to have the temperature exactly right. And that's another one of the main reasons why when we light windrows, we cut the paddock more often, because we know we'll do it in the late afternoon where it's still going to be warm enough.
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow that temperature to get down cold. Fine with canola stubbles and canola windrows, that's not as important because it burns so hot anyway. That can burn through the night and still reach massive temperatures.
All right. Well, I think we're just about done. Have you got any last closing comments there, Rod?
Not really. I guess I could just say, look, there's not one tool. You've just got to have a crack at everything, and don't be afraid to try something different. When we were sort of moldboarding, when we bought this moldboard and we rocked up with it, we didn't tell Dad we'd bought it, and he just absolutely flipped out. It was quite funny. The previous month, we were up at Windrowed, which is even north of us, and Pete Newman gave a speech. There was spading trials and things like that. Pete's gone, well, I can't work out why everyone wants a spader. Why don't you try a moldboard and you bury all the weed seeds, because obviously Pete's the weed seed guru. So the next week we rang Pete, and he had a little market garden moldboard there, and we got that out, and we basically just ploughed in a crop in July and threw all the weeds and everything, and by August we'd ordered this the big plough you see in that previous photo. So
didn't even wait for the results.
Didn't wait for the results, no. We just saw the difference in the non-wetting soils.
We did get some results. We got 98 or 99% weed control, I think, didn't we? And that was enough for you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So look, there's benefits of every system you do. nothing is easy. Burning windrows is not easy. Making chaff carts is not easy. It's expensive. Moldboarding is not easy. It's expensive. There's pros and cons of everything. But you just got to keep challenging yourself when you're on that header or on that spray rig. What can I do different, or how can I attack that without having to rely on chemicals at every step of the way?
Excellent. All right, well, we're just about done. I'm a bit concerned about the lack of questions, and that makes me worry that the questions panel isn't working. So hopefully we've managed to answer some of your questions as we went. I'm going to put up a blatant advert there for RE Insight magazine. If you'd like to subscribe to that, the easiest way is just text subscribe to that phone number there. Next week we have same bat time, same bat channel, another webinar about the chaff cart. You've heard a little bit about chaff carts this week. Well, in RE we developed an extension technique for chaff carts. What we do is we get some farmers, we put them in a Tarago with Lance Turner, we drive them around, they give presentations. At the end of the week, the farmers that were in the Tarago with Lance buy a chaff cart. So we're going to try, we can't do every farmer with a Tarago with Lance, so we're going to try and speed that up a bit by doing a webinar. Lance has been very generous with his time, sharing his story with lots of growers around the country about how he implemented chaff carts in his system, and was also instrumental in putting the conveyor belt delivery on the chaff cart. So yeah, next week we'll hear from Lance Turner. So if you haven't subscribed for that one already, please do. So that's it for today's webinar. Thank you for attending. Hopefully we haven't had problems with the questions panel, but I apologise if we have. And thanks very much, Rod, for giving up your time this morning and helping us out.
Yeah, no worries, Pete, and yeah, good luck with it all. There's plenty of information out there on the RE website, the Weed Smart website. I think GRDC have done that many videos of us lighting up fires and lighting up windrows and stuff, so there's plenty of information out there, and yeah, by all means, give either myself or Andrew or Pete a call if you sort of need to know anything. We're, yeah, more than happy to help. Otherwise, yeah, we might see some of you around the track someday.
Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day.